Hi there, I'm Dr. Ute, an accredited and chartered counseling psychologist, a chartered coaching psychologist, a fellow of the higher education here in Britain, and a therapist. I welcome you to the podcast. The podcast is a little bit different to how other podcasts are working. My guests are asking me questions. They are often from my population of students who said, look, we really want to ask you questions we can't ask in the lecture hall. But this podcast is also open to you. If you have questions you ever wanted to ask a psychologist, DM me and you will be sitting next to me very soon. Enjoy the podcast. Hey Phoebe.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on to the podcast. And as always, I don't know any of the questions Phoebe has prepared. And guys, she has prepared. She brought a proper notebook and everything. So start, just shoot. And I hope you guys gonna enjoy that as much as I hopefully will.
Okay, so my starting question, as a psychology student myself, well, a psychology graduate now, every time somebody asks me, what did you study? I say psychology, and I get an instant reaction of, oh my gosh, can you read my mind? Are you going to psychoanalyze me? And it seems to be the same reaction I get from everybody. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that is greatly heightened as a therapist when you tell people that you meet for the first time that you're a therapist. And I wonder, do you think people that you're meeting, are they intimidated, maybe even in like the dating world or things like this? How do people react when they ask you what you do and you say you're a therapist?
Okay, so that's more a question as me as a person, right?
Yes,
okay.
It's a personal question.
I do not tell people what I do as a profession. Because of that. I just gotten really bored by, oh, can you read my mind? And because I'm actually quite a nice person. I started off by saying, no, of course not, And now, because I'm probably not so nice any longer, I say, yes, of course. Just because I find it funny, but the other people don't find it funny at all. When people ask me, do you psychoanalyze me? Again, I started to come from a point where I, of course, explained that I'm not an analyst, right? Yeah. Because I haven't done Freud and I'm not good. And now I say only if I get paid, which quickly closes the conversation down. But to summarize all of it, I avoid saying that I'm a therapist exactly out of these reasons. Yeah. I have been on dates where people said to me, it's so comfortable talking to you.
And they don't know.
And I thought, okay, wow. I had other dates where people said, can I just book a session with you? And so they knew what I did for as a profession. And it felt all really, really wrong and really bad. So now I'm refraining from letting people know.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm wondering where that reaction is coming from in terms of their side. Is it a thing, especially even for me, saying that I was a psychology student, it kind of almost seems like an intimidation, or where I don't think maybe other subjects get that, and I'm wondering where that's coming from their side.
Yeah, I think if you look at social discourse around psychology, it's about how do people behave, how do people think, right? What does make people tick a particular way? What we do is we are trying to explain human behavior, which very quickly can be shortcutted to we know about human behavior.
Right.
What I would say, of course, if you work enough or work long enough in the profession, you become an exceptionally good observer and listener. And as diverse we all are, and that's what I find so fascinating about humans, as different everyone is, we have so many things where we are alike. Yeah. And it blows my mind, even though I've been working for many, many years in that area, how often it is, okay, now we are we are in things that you can actually see in each person. And the moment you think you grasp it, everything is just exploding again into different areas. I think one of the reasons really is that people believe we can explain behaviors.
Yeah.
And if you watch, I don't know, CSI or Criminal Minds, or I don't know, I have a very bad taste in TV, I do apologize. You always have the psychologist, right?
Yeah.
Of course,
the stereotype character.
Yes, and nowadays, of course, the forensic psychologist, because that's what it's hip now, or the behavioral unit psychologist, who then comes on looking very cool and says, of course it's like that. And I love Dr. Reed, right? It's just not true.
Right. Yeah, it's a character that's been created. And I suppose for people who haven't studied psychology, that's what they see in the media, and so that's what they assume then when someone says they study psychology or they're a therapist.
Yeah. I think you will be stuck with that forever.
I think that's okay. Maybe I'll take the mysterious approach like you do.
Yes.
Okay, my second question is more going actually into the therapy room itself. Okay. So I've had quite a lot of therapy myself, and I always find different approaches in my therapist to when it comes to me crying. And I've heard something lately which is about a tissue box. And I'm not sure if have you heard this?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so
Intrigued.
Yeah, so what they say is that you shouldn't, as a therapist, offer your client a tissue when they are crying, because this is giving the signal to them that they need to clean themselves up, or that there's something wrong with crying. Even if it's a subconscious signal, that's telling them, okay, it's time to clear yourself up, it's time to stop crying. So the idea is that as a therapist, you should have the tissue box on the table, and then it's up to the client to then take a tissue if that's what they want to do. I wondered your opinions on kind of letting clients cry, because I've had all kinds of different, I've had physical comfort from therapists, I've had absolutely nothing and just letting me cry for as long as it takes, I've had tissues offered. So what's your thoughts on that?
Much more complicated. I tell you why, because crying is not crying. Let me start with one thing. Crying is not a sign of weakness in any shape or form. It has been, I think, coined that way, especially I think I would like to say that in combo with women, right? Women, soft, cry, weak. I have cried many times in meetings, and I am still told again and again and again that apparently I have quite often the biggest balls in the meeting, because I am very, very objective whilst crying. Crying is a way of us to process stuff. Yeah. It doesn't make me a weak person in any shape or form. So now the question arises, what is the crying in function of, right? I do EMDR, which is, so I work a lot with trauma, PTSD, CPTSD, but also with traumatic thoughts and experiences that are stuck in people's brains. And there we have something which we call upreaction, which means when you are holding or bearing that really difficult thing, you can have a very strong emotional reaction to not holding like that, but keeping it on your hand, bearing it in that moment. It's quite weird actually, because you feel attached to it but also removed from it at the same time. Okay. And it comes very often with tears. In that in these circumstances, I can't remember that I ever offered tissues, ever.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's just not part of the process we are working through.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember as a much younger therapist at the beginning of my career, I worked in a hospice. So I started working in a hospice. I worked with people who were bereaved, and later on worked with people who were dying.
Okay.
And I remember a client who lost somebody, and that person who had died in that moment was incredibly strongly in the room. And my client broke together and sunk onto their knees, and they had their head on my knees. Yeah. And I totally freaked out inwardly because, oh my goodness, you're not allowed to touch a client, and I got to go to prison. That was what my brain said immediately. Right. In retrospective, I must say I showed courage, because in that moment, that is what the person needed, right? Yeah. I had times when somebody cried so hard, they were looking for tissues. They couldn't see the tissues on the table. Of course I gave them tissues. It wouldn't be a human thing to do, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, you sit there in the room as a human. Yes, I'm a therapist. Yes, I'm an expert. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I'm a lecturer. Yes, I do podcasts. Guess what? I'm a human, the same as you. And extending a tissue at times is really nothing else but being kind. Yeah. And I think we should not forget that either. Yeah.
And what I'm really taking from that as well, I really like what you said about tears not being a weakness.
No, you're not.
Because I've definitely felt a lot of that, especially as a woman and in conflict. I'm always I go straight to tears when I get in any kind of confrontation, and that has made me feel very weak in the past. But I really like what you said about sometimes, the most power and the most strength actually comes from when you are crying and showing that emotion.
So, look, I have not been in a different place. The only advantage I have is that I'm older, right? And I've used my training also to work through a couple of things in my life. If people are out there, have the same situation you just so beautifully and really kindly shared, I would really encourage you to pause for a moment when these tears are coming and asking yourself, what is the thing with which you're actually struggling now? Right. Are you struggling with the crying, or are you struggling with, I'm crying and I shouldn't cry? And then the shame and the guilt and all the blah that comes with it. Because the latter is going to take strength away. The tears? Right? So here, really pausing for a moment and thinking, what's happening? What takes my power away? Is quite a powerful piece of insight.
In itself, yeah.
So in a way, allow me to be quite naughty. I hope it happens again. So you can give it a shot.
Okay.
For you guys too.
So I think that leads quite well on to my next question, which is a bit what you were talking about there with people working through their trauma during therapy. I've been wondering a lot in the therapy that I've been doing if there comes a point where actually therapy has to end, especially when it's working through trauma and you're going over and over and over something that's happened to you in the past. And for me, there's been a lot of reliving the emotions that I went through at that time. Does there come a point in therapy where actually it's time to stop and move on?
Yeah. One of my famous sayings to clients is, I'm not your cocaine. Okay. So as soon as you really need me like a line of cocaine, I'm out of there. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
My job is to make myself redundant, right? Look, I have clients who check in from time to time, right? They send me an email and say, haven't seen you for 6 months. I've got a thing. Can we talk about the thing?
Yeah.
And then we talk about the thing, right?
Yeah.
But yes, therapy needs to end. And guess what? You don't have to therapy out everything either. I believe, right?
Yeah.
And talking about the same thing again and 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 again, and I would like to say it for another 10 minutes. I from where I come from, and I have colleagues who will totally probably be upset with me now. I don't think it's healthy.
I agree.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because I'm taking something, I hope I get this. I get this right, because it's an English saying and I'm famous for mocking them up really badly. And this is a saying a patient gave to me.
Okay.
It's putting your big boy's pants on.
Yeah.
Is this right?
Yeah, put my big boy pants on, yeah.
And so I said, okay, I can put my big girl's pants on, or my big person's pants on. Sometimes we got to put these pants on and walk, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying avoidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying suppression. What I'm saying is there is a point where we are moving on, right? We can even go a bit more. And again, let me quote one of the men I'm in love with, is Alfred Adler. I seem to have something for dead men. And Alfred Adler said, what we quite often do is we recreating a memory in order to give evidence for how we are feeling in the moment. Let me say this again. We are recreating the past, which is a memory recreation, in order to have internal evidence that gives us a basis for, this is why I feel right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this can happen when we just, are like a terrier holding on to something.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's something I definitely wanted to bring up. And then I think another question that I've had, a lot of what's called psycho-speak is going around at the moment. And a term that I keep hearing brought up again and again is the term boundaries. Yeah. And I want to ask what your understanding of placing a boundary is, because I understand it very much in the sense of, for example, in a work scenario, they're calling, the typical example of they're calling you after hours and you say, I'm not able to take this call right now. I don't take it out of hours. I'll take it when I'm working in the morning. In that sense, I understand it very well. But I think the term is being used so much now on social media by loads of people I speak to, and when it comes to actually placing boundaries in healthy relationships that are good, I know there's a need for them, but I don't think I have a full understanding.
Yeah. I think the problem here is we are using a noun, and a noun is always giving us something very static, right? Right. Plus boundary gives us a vision of something quite hard. And all of that is nonsense. Yeah. Even at the workplace, right? Yeah. Because I would say, if you don't take a call after hours, I hope you never on social media whilst you're working. Right?
Right, yeah.
Because the moment you go on your social media stuff during working hours, I'm going to claim time from you, right? So here we already have, what is boundaries, correct? Yeah. Look, boundaries at the end of the day. Can I come to a different word here? Would you allow me to?
Yeah, of course.
How can I respect the other person's world? And how can I help the other person to respect my world? And that's boundaries. Right. Right?
Yeah.
So a stupid example is, I don't like sex in the morning, so don't you dare touch me in the morning. That's my boundary.
Yeah.
Now what's happening? You are waking up feeling rather, let me just say horny. Come on, that's the only word I remember anyway. And you think, oh shit, what am I going to do now? Right? So that doesn't work, does it?
Right.
I think a boundary in a healthy relationship must be always based on communication, must be based on listening, and it must be based on the understanding that if the other person says, pause here or hold or don't or no, that we respect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much more, how can we say, movable than the word suggests.
Yeah.
It is, however, used nowadays as a weapon.
Yeah.
Right. And
this is definitely what I'm seeing.
Yeah, me too.
And it's made me confused about the word because there's so many different meanings of the word, and I completely agree with what you've said there, that actually, even though it sounds like such a hard stop, a boundary, that actually should be a lot more flexibility and graciousness, especially if it's in like a healthy relationship.
A good, healthy relationship. Yeah, of course.
So it's good to hear that you say that as well.
So it's a lot less rigid.
Yeah.
But interestingly, in a time where everything becomes more fluent. And we have so many more choices. We seem to yearn for rigidity quite quickly, right?
Yeah. It's sometimes easier.
Because it's easier, of course. Making a choice is really hard, right?
Yeah.
And even though we want it all, what we don't want is to make the choice and take responsibility for the outcome.
Right. So then you just go for the...
Quite quickly.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all my questions.
Thank you so much. And I thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that. And see you soon.